You're listening to Risk and Resolve. And now for your hosts, Ben Connor and Todd Hufford.
Welcome back to another episode of Risk and Resolve. I'm your co-host, Ben Connor, alongside Todd Hufford. Today's special guest is Dr. Chad Nowlin. Dr. Chad is a doctor of physiotherapy who started his own clinical practice in 2018 with a focus on root cause pain relief through holistic care, focusing on full body movement and mobility. His commitment to treating comprehensively led him to discover the Keystone Reset, which I'm looking forward to diving into, which corrects one key body asymmetry that creates increased mobility and decreased pain throughout the body within just a few minutes. This approach to musculoskeletal care, also called MSK care, has paved the way for true preventive framework for employers to minimize MSK health and work comp claims. He's gone off to work with some of the state's largest corporations, helping them implement strategies to improve employee health and wellness, and continues to speak and educate on simple strategies to improve musculoskeletal health and longevity. Dr. Chad is on a mission to deliver pain freedom to as many people as possible by reshaping the way employers and their employees interface with MSK-related healthcare. The driving force behind his mission and purpose is deeply rooted in faith and primary role as a husband and father of three. What a mission to be on, Chad. Thanks for being with us today.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Well, Chad, we met, like 3 or 4 years ago. And what I learned in that first meeting, which was probably 30 minutes, is, man, you're a force to be reckoned with on things can be done differently in healthcare, and just your vision was palpable. But before we dive into that, give us a little bit of your background and kind of what got you here.
Sure. So like you mentioned before, doctor of physical therapy by trade, and kind of got my feet wet in the corporate scene. I'm originally from Texas, and so my first job was there. Spent a couple of years at a clinic that he was 2 locations, just one city apart. And I quickly became kind of the lead therapist on for the university there. And so I had my full caseload, and then once or twice a week, a bus full of athletes would walk in all at the same time. So, I carried a caseload of, 14 or 15 patients per day. And then a couple of days a week, that would spike to 24 or 5 within a single hour. And so, just got a good dose of how the system was going to work really quickly. When we moved to Indiana in 2016, I went to work for Athletico, and it was largely the same. And so the corporate environment was a great opportunity to get a lot of reps in, doing certain things just with the nature of high volume clinics. And that's ultimately what kind of drove me out, which was I just had this gnawing inside that, man, I just think if I had more time with people, I could do something different. I could do something better. Just the cognitive dissonance eventually just forced me out of the corporate setting into my own business, which was Energy Physio. And, but there was kind of this interim moment that I think it really is what paved the way for what I'm doing now, which is, and I was too chicken to just quit and start my own business. So I took a part-time job, and looking back, I kind of regret not just going all in on myself, but at the same time, had I done that, I would have never seen a facet of healthcare that I didn't know existed, which was employer-based healthcare. I actually went to work for a company that had me stationed as the on-site therapist for a Kohl's distribution center, which was right in my backyard. I mean, literally 2 minutes from where I live. So it was great. And just kind of opened my eyes to kind of a different vehicle of delivery for physical therapy. And so I kind of had this part-time job over here delivering inside the employer-based model. And then over here, I was starting my practice working with CrossFit athletes. So they seem like they're worlds apart. And in a sense, they kind of are. The demographics that we get with employer groups are definitely different than the CrossFit athlete, but that is what taught me everything that became super relevant and important for preventative models, treatment care models that are efficient for our employer groups, because I was seeing people who are using their bodies in a different way. And I was checking every joint on every person every time, regardless of their pain location. And ultimately, that's where we just started to pick up on these patterns that would become some of our primary frameworks for how we work with anybody. And so that's kind of what led me here. The corporate, I couldn't handle the corporate gig anymore, and just kind of opened my eyes to some new opportunities. And I knew as soon as I saw the employer-based healthcare model that was something I was going to have to figure out for myself as I continued
Yeah.
on.
So you've kind of set aside this dichotomy, if you will, of traditional physical therapy and the traditional physical therapy practice of someone that's injured that comes in that needs and hopes that they can feel better so they don't have to have surgery. And you've the other side of this is you mentioned checking every joint, preventive, those sorts of things. Can we dive into like how are what are those two separate worlds? What is the different offering?
Yeah, you know, I knew when I left the corporate scene, there were a couple of commitments I made early on, and one of those was I'm not taking insurance. So that was the thing that I perceived as the biggest barrier between the type of care I wanted to provide and not being able to do that. And of course, you know, you know the drill. Once insurance gets involved, there's so many layers of complexity that exist for any type of clinical setting when it comes down to support staff and billing, claims denials, and all these types of things. Ultimately, the reimbursement rates for therapy were very low, which is why we had like such high productivity metrics we were chasing after. And once you add in the complexity of billing and claims denials, and then you have to pay people to do that as their full-time job, so I knew I could go into business for myself and take insurance and probably get up to speed pretty quickly. But in terms of being scalable, I had already seen what that looks like at Athletico and at the other clinic I worked at. And that wasn't a model that I wanted to reproduce, because I knew ultimately it was going to end the same way, which is if I was ever going to grow a business, step out of fulfillment into running a business, it was just going to be a high volume scenario. And ultimately, all roads lead back to the same type of treatment model. I didn't want to do that. So I committed early. Hey, I am cash pay. Okay. We can take HSA and those types of things. I was going to be very focused around a specific clientele, at least getting started. And that was what we did. I worked with CrossFit for 2 years until I could really, afford to start branching out into some other lanes through online marketing. And that was the biggest probably separator in the two worlds in terms of just delivering physical therapy. That doesn't even include like an employer contract, which functions largely the same as cash pay because it's direct. But that commitment early was huge. Working one-on-one was also another big one. Very difficult to do that in the insurance-based setting, just due to the nature of volume. The volume you need to produce a margin in that setting. Once you grow beyond a certain point, it just becomes difficult to do. I think, a lot of solo practices can do really well, make a lot of money, provide great care, but you can only grow so far. And so, I always, I always had a bigger vision than being a one kind of a one clinic guy and treating forever. I was thinking a little more long term than that. And so the cash pay model is what allowed me to learn a lot of things that I would not have learned otherwise, like the Keystone Reset, which you talked about earlier. And so, some of these things that I just decided early on, for other reasons are ultimately what led to the track we're on now, the things I've learned about the human body and how we kind of integrate that into this end-to-end type of musculoskeletal effort, which really includes, yeah, how can we pick up on problems before they start and have a legitimate prevention program that goes far beyond just stretch more or do this series of stretches at your workstation before you start, all the way out to what does it look like to return somebody to work, maybe post surgical or post injury, with less likelihood of recurrence, repeating the same problem over and over again. And I don't know if that answered all of your question or if I chased
Yeah,
you.
I mean, can what you're doing now be done in a traditional setting?
Absolutely not. Insurance won't pay for it. That some of the nature of insurance is that you have to produce a diagnosis code and treatment has to follow with that code. And to truly solve somebody's problem, and that we're talking about medically necessary care here, I think, like a traditional physical therapy clinic, to have people pay for a preventative type model, you can't sell people a solution to a problem for a problem people don't think they have. That's just really hard to do. A little different with employers because there's an ROI attached to that. Regular people can't think in terms of like, oh well, if I just never have that problem, then I'll save a lot of money. So it's a different environment. But due to the nature of diagnosis codes, if you have, let's say, low back pain, which comes with, a couple of different diagnosis codes, documentation has to follow suit with that diagnosis code. And if you have a secondary diagnosis code, here's what's really goofy is you can't treat this two different diagnosis codes in the same treatment or even on the same day. And so let's say somebody has a knee episode and a low back episode, and you want, them to go 2 times a week for 8 weeks. For both of them, they have to go 4 times a week for 8 weeks. You have to work the knee one day, you have to work the low back another day. Now, maybe some of this has changed in the last 5 or 6 years. I'm largely unplugged from that. So there could have been some changes that have happened since I've stepped out. I doubt it. Changes in healthcare don't happen quickly or often. And so that was just a real negative because my perception of how the body works was if we're going to solve a problem in the low back, we have to solve these other hidden problems in the ankles, the knees, the hips, the shoulders. And so then it kind of created this ethical mess of like, okay, well, the right thing to do is what's right for the patient, but ethically I can't bill for that, but it was time that we spent. And so then I have to document it and chart it because I did it, but then we can't bill for it. And then now then you got somebody, higher up the chain breathing down your neck about why you did a bunch of stuff and didn't bill for it. And it's just convoluted mess once you get into that. And stepping out into cash pay removes all of those barriers. I mean, essentially do what you want. You are now, in the insurance based setting, it's such an interesting dynamic because the patient is the patient, but they're not your client. The insurance company is your client because you have to do what satisfies them to get paid. Once you remove that relationship and now it's a direct exchange of money for result or service or outcome, now you're really free to do what's best for the client. And sometimes that includes just what do they want and not what do you think they want or what they should want, but it's really the relationship that is more like all other businesses function, which is we are going to exchange dollars for what it is that you want. And that's a great relationship to have. And it functions much better. Everybody's happier. Results are better. There's just a lot of positives that came with that.
So what I heard is in the setting you're in before, you have a patient that comes in, they present as a condition that you're trying to solve for, and you need to do an activity to get paid. And there's only a certain activities that you can do to get paid, and that's it. And So you have a condition and activity, and an outcome is somewhat the thing that's not paid for, which there's value-based care and that kind of thing, but it's really not how the model is made for that, right? But
Yeah, physical therapy, I don't think fits that. Like, value-based care and like primary care functions a little different.
right.
You flip over into physical therapy, it's things can get kind of weird,
But now you
especially,
have but now you
especially,
have a model where you're talking about the goal. You have a patient as a condition, and the desired outcome prescribes the activity,
yes.
right?
Yes, not the diagnosis.
Condition and outcome produce the activity rather than what the payment source is, or if
Exactly.
you will get paid, because you're dealing with the person who wants the outcome, because that's what's ultimately important.
That's it. That's it. And outcomes are the most important for obvious reasons. But I think what's been really nice about the shift in payment model is that now we can more clearly define what the appropriate outcome is, because pain relief is not the appropriate outcome. Pain, like chasing pain relief, is what leads people down a rabbit hole of quick fixes and solutions that don't lead to a real root cause management of a problem. And that even gets down to the diagnosis code level, where when the primary metric you're measuring is pain, and you can only isolate your treatment down to this area associated with a diagnosis code, then it's very difficult to attach other objective measurements to show improvement outside of that area. So, the ankles are a huge problem for most people. If somebody has low back pain, they've probably got stiff and asymmetric ankles. I've seen that enough at this point. And a good illustration is like dieting. So if your only focus is calories and you're not losing weight, then the tendency is, "Oh, I'm just going to eat less calories." Well, eventually that gets to a point where you're eating less and less, but you're still not losing weight. People don't ever eat so little that it's impossible not to lose weight, but they never eat the correct amount of things to systematize the weight loss. And you end up with only one trackable metric, which is weight loss. And then you have no ways to really show your progress outside of scale up or down. Versus you can track your protein, you can track your total calories, you can track your fat intake and your carbohydrate intake. And now we have four metrics to show progress. Okay, I hit the protein, I hit the carbs, I hit the calories, I hit the fat. Now we have all these other metrics, and then you can tie in softer metrics like uh, waist measurement or progress pick daily, and we can start seeing other elements of progress, even if the scale's a flat line. And it's the same with physical therapy. It's like, yeah, pain might be the same for a period of time while we're implementing certain treatments and strategies. But if we reframe the outcome as not pain relief, and we reframe it as movement quality is increased, joint mobility is increased, uh, then pain is a natural reduction off of those things. Like one of our common mantras is, if you don't change the way you move, you won't change the way you feel. And so much about diagnosis based treatment is designed to change the way people feel and not change the way they move, which is the root cause of most people's pain is they don't move very well. And there are a lot of reasons for that. But once you step outside of diagnosis based care into how can we make this person feel better and also not focus completely on how they feel, turns out progress is much faster and it's much easier to objectify and show progress, which is important for patients. It's like, hey, look, yeah, we haven't moved the needle a lot on your pain, but look, your movement's better, your mobility's better. You're able to work longer before you have pain. When the pain starts, it's not as bad as it was. There's so many different ways and angles to look at progress once you step outside of, a 0 to 10 pain scale.
Um, how did- so with this model and going out on your own, what what's the future of really appropriate pain management and the opportunity for preventive physical therapy to impact the rest of a population or for the future of a person?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I got some big ideas around that. As far as I am aware, there are not very many preventative services currently. Musculoskeletal health, as it relates to employer-sponsored healthcare, really is synonymous with physical therapy, which is too late. Medically necessary care is very important, but there is a huge, huge play to be made in the preventative space, and it wouldn't look that much different than primary care, which is, hey, let's go get your blood testing, let's get your biometric screening done, and just get a baseline. Uh, Now I estimate, and this is just based on, I don't know, common sense, maybe total guess, but I would estimate that probably 80% of an employee population has pain. There's not doing anything about it. And then you can take whatever fraction of people that actually have claims related to musculoskeletal health is a much smaller percentage of that. But the truth is, there's a big problem lurking just beneath the surface of all claims for an employer, because a lot of their employees have pain and they just think it's normal. And, I had another birthday, so that's why my knee hurts. And it's simply not true. But because we know that movement is the root cause of pain, it's very easy to screen for. And these are some of the huge positives that came out of working with CrossFitters and also checking full body all the time, is because when I started doing that, it was very, very quickly that I started noticing the patterns that people have. Where, I mean, the human frame, outside of rare anomalies, is the same for everybody. And so it only makes sense that when things go wrong, they can only go wrong in so many ways. And so what we see very, very consistently is when somebody has low back pain, their squat looks a certain way, the way they bend over and pick stuff up looks a certain way, the way they lift things over their head looks a certain way. And those movements always default into the same negative patterns, because the body always follows the path of least resistance. And so it's just going around a restriction. And ultimately that's what leads to breakdown of tissues. The body is a machine. It's an organic machine. And when you start taking parts that should be carrying load and then they don't, it shifts the load somewhere else. This is how machines break down. It's how the body breaks down. And so after seeing all the patterns of how movement leads to certain pain conditions, it's very easy to quickly screen somebody's movement and have an understanding of what joints are not moving well that creates that pattern of movement. And then what are the things we need to implement early and quickly to change the mobility so we can change the movement pattern very simply. You can screen somebody's movement in 3 minutes. It doesn't take very long. And build prevention programs based on that. It's like, hey, look, the people aren't seeking medically necessary care yet, but waiting for them to seek care, we know that's too late, because once somebody has pain, that means they've been ignoring the problem for a long time. And pain's the last thing to show up. It's a lagging indicator, not a leading indicator. So all we do is we go in and look at the leading indicators and just say, hey, look, I mean, you do that long enough with enough weight, enough repetitions, these are the types of problems you're going to have. We just solve for X before X becomes, I need to go to physical therapy. I need to see the doc. I need to have medication, injection, advanced imaging. Definitely not trying to let people slide down the slope to surgery, especially with most of the research indicating that it's not necessary.
So double click into that. You said research says that it's not necessary. Why would surgery not be necessary?
And let's preface that with, surgery is sometimes necessary. I think just the way the system is designed, it's easy to assume that it's necessary when it's not. Most people get to a surgical procedure with a lot of stones left to turn over in their care track. And I think starting with a preventative model will allow you to educate people on what those stones are before you really need to consider surgery, and create a lot of wedges in between certain other stepping stones to at least slow the process down. Surgery is a very, very valuable service, especially when it's done the right person at the right time for the right reason. But it can also become a swift nightmare when people have surgery and then they think they're better because they're forced to take rest. And then they resume their normal life. And then not long after that, here comes the same pain they had before. And their physical therapy is not the right model. Like the current therapy that exists is not the correct model necessarily to prevent surgery, because there's still more things that need to be addressed if we're going to really impact those numbers in the biggest way.
You talked about how your cash pay system, which is not uncommon on the healthcare side. Thinking through work comp, how do you serve a injured worker who's in the work comp system where it's just naturally tied to an insurance company, and it's really hard to break that out? How does that work in your world?
I mean, honestly, when we're on site with an employer, it's just a reroute. Um,
And who pays it?
that's that almost extends further than my pay grade goes. I can tell you what I know. I'll never tell you anything I don't know. When we're on site with an employer and they have somebody come into, let's say, HR, they're like, "Hey, I was working, I hurt my back." They say, "Go to the health clinic," and we just start right there, because it doesn't have to become something bigger than it is if we can just start it in the right place. I do believe that a lot of musculoskeletal based health problems, whether it be health plan or work comp, escalate into higher cost services simply because people start in the wrong place. They have a musculoskeletal health problem and they start in primary care. And primary care is not well suited to handle musculoskeletal issues. They have very little training. They have very little knowledge of the types of strategies that need to be put in place for somebody who has a physical, like a musculoskeletal health problem. And it almost always walks away with prescription. And it can very quickly escalate to imaging. Once you get on those stepping stones, injections are just right around the corner. And if you go to physical therapy that's ineffective and you've already stacked up an image, an injection, physical therapy that didn't work, and medications are ineffective, I mean, what's the next step? You know what I mean? By all accounts, it looks like, yeah, we need to address that little anatomy thing on your image through surgery. And so when it comes to work comp, I think the biggest play to be made there is in the prevention space, because most work comp is not traumatic. It's exacerbation at work. And people, last year I explored the idea of, well, no other insurance on the planet will insure a pre-existing condition. So is there any play that we can make to just prove that these conditions are pre-existing and just make sure it doesn't funnel into work comp because they already had the problem? That was a quick and hard no, because exacerbation at work falls under the purview of work comp. So the idea is like, okay, well, we already know they have the problem. They have pain when they came to work today. That's a problem. We can easily identify that and just say, hey, well, how about we not get worse at work today and we just solve some of these problems before that happens. We can quickly screen their movement and understand the dynamic between their movement pattern and the nature of the work they're doing, and say, oh, yeah, well, if you do this type of work with that movement pattern, of course your body's going to hurt worse, and just solve that quickly. So probably one of the easier things to do would be drop work comp claims. from exacerbation at work, I think that would even be easier than health plan claims. The solutions are all the same. I mean, we're still dealing with a human body and human movement. And so the screening looks the same. The understanding of how the movement patterns play out inside of their workstation, that's the same. And then largely how you take that information and build it into a prevention program or some type of treatment strategy, still the same. It just funnels into different buckets versus health plan and work comp.
Yeah, I guess what I was looking for was, most employers do not have a clinic on site. They're working with an offsite, commercial clinic like some of the ones you've worked for, or ones that provide even broader services beyond just physical therapy.
Mhm.
Do you have a model built today where, a client, a customer, an employer essentially can buy into your services? And if the injured worker is presenting with these 5 or 6 different areas of pain, rather than going to your main Concentra or whatever clinic that might address a lot of different things that might eventually refer you to physical therapy, that do you have either a mobile individual or some kind of setup where the trained HR could say, let's go here first, and maybe that employer pays it out of pocket and doesn't try to get the carrier, the work comp carrier, to pay that claim. They just triage it, but they don't triage it internally. They triage it externally through your organization. Do you have that model built? Are you thinking in that direction?
Yes, 100%. And this is where virtual is so high value. When you understand how pain presents and why, solving problems virtually is much easier. And we have a system of techniques where we actually teach people very effectively how to self-mobilize the joints that we know are going to be problematic in their pain condition. We also know through the Keystone Reset that if you don't address this thing first, the chances you're going to have the best effort on the other things and go way, way down. And so most people can solve most problems with very, very, very little effort. And I think people are trying to replace in person physical therapy with virtual physical therapy, which I think is the wrong play. I think they both have their place. One is access. Like somebody has an injury at work, they need to be speaking to a clinician inside of 24 hours. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One, if we're just going to take good care of people, we need to see them quickly and get them started on something that's going to move them in a positive direction very quickly. The other thing is, and this leans towards the skeptical side and human nature a little bit, but the longer somebody has pain who got hurt at work, the longer their brain has the time to formulate this idea that they can not work and get paid. Because if they go down the work comp route, they're going to get paid to not work. And you don't want to leave an employee there for a very long time. We want to get these people feeling better and back to work ASAP before they can ever have the thought of how long can I milk this thing and get paid to not work. And getting connected with somebody within 24 hours is a huge play, and definitely connecting them with legitimate strategies to solve their problem is first and foremost. Then it just frees you up to understand, okay, we installed some of the things that are most likely to help this person. You give yourself a little bit of breathing room to say, okay, if we have to triage this to the next level, when and where and how are we going to do that? Because there's somebody locally that can help solve that problem. You can't discount the value of seeing somebody in person. The When you have the right clinician in person, you can't beat that. It is unbeatable. Uh, and this goes for any industry. If you have the wrong clinician in person, it sucks. Just like anything else. They're really good people, really great at what they do. And then there's a lot of mediocrity. And this is in every environment. I just think it's more detrimental in healthcare because somebody's footing the bill that's not the clinician. And so when they're very average and they provide a very suboptimal result, there's dollars and cents attached to that. That's either going to hurt the patient or the employer, whoever's footing the bill for that. And so using virtual as a means to weed out people who don't need in-person care and weed in people that do, giving yourself the breathing room to vet out the highest quality service that somebody could access in an area, to solve that problem to the highest degree in a great way for the patient and the employer. Because I also think there's another great play to be made just with more cash pay clinicians popping up in every city and every state. There's a lot of opportunity to serve smaller employers just through better triage and care navigation outside of the normal networks of physical therapy and health systems. Because these cash pay clinicians, they're the best at what they do. If they weren't, they can't exist, because they have to provide legitimate value for thousands of dollars. And the ones who can't do that, they don't hang around very long.
Right.
But they're obscure. Like, nobody knows about them because they're in some little niche market, doing word of mouth services. But these are some of the greatest clinicians you're going to find on the entire planet, and they're all over the place. People just don't know about them. And so part of my, future big mission is, how can we become a central hub that helps people solve problems digitally and virtually, especially for small employers who can't necessarily put somebody on site, but then triage care out more intelligently to a legitimate cash practice who can organize a direct contract relationship, fee per visit that everybody agrees to, and ideally with a cap. Like, hey, look,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, we're never going to charge you more than this, like, per episode, just to create kind of some protective mechanisms, like, for everybody. But I think how physical therapy is starting to get more cash pay traction, it is going to create some opportunity in the healthcare space for employers, especially the smaller ones, because, even, Batesville, out in the middle of nowhere, there's probably a cash practitioner somewhere close over there. They're becoming less and less spread out and starting to pop up in all these different places.
So what I'm hearing is almost this idea of the movement of direct primary care, that moving over to physical therapy, where you can empower, uh, direct relationships with employers. And the best triage mechanism is intake virtually, and then deployment to where, you have the biggest area of need. So you're more efficient with everyone's time. So if it is a minor situation that you can coach to, hey, let's start with this, and this, and let's circle back and see how that's going, versus someone you're like, hey, you need to come in. Like, we need to do some work, because we have to, send this the other direction, with what you're experiencing. Is that right?
Yeah. And I think that works for any model, honestly. So take a large manufacturing employer who has several thousand people on site, across all shifts. This is the best opportunity to have on-site physical therapy. But at the same time, it's like, why would we not run like MSK audits and screening upfront? Let's get prevention programs installed based on true need and legitimate problems people have, not some arbitrary stretching program. And then as we start to triage in medically necessary care, we should be weeding out people who don't need to be seen in person, so that the schedule is open for people that actually do. And this saves room for people who need legitimate, hands-on, in-person care. It saves room on the schedule for, like, some emergent work comp stuff, like, hey, this just happened, can we get in? And I think the triage mechanism works in all scenarios. I just think there's a more unique benefit for smaller employers who could not afford on-site care.
Right.
because now we can serve them in largely the same way. And then when it just gets to a point of navigation where it's like, okay, we have a partner who we vetted out, they provide great care. Let's organize a direct relationship and a contract. And so when they do need hands on, they're going here and they're going to get a better model of care versus like, Athleticos and ATIs and selects. They've got great clinicians in there, but they're still strapped by the model that they're in.
Yeah.
You cannot get around that. It doesn't matter how good the clinician is, they are still going to be a product of the environment that they're in at a certain level. And so just triaging somebody to in-person care for a direct, like contracted rate with an insurance-based clinic, it might be more easily accessible and available, but they're still going to get the same model. And that's the problem with physical therapy. It's the model. It's the delivery system and the environment that they're in that limits the type of care they can get. And so by shifting over here to solo practitioners, cash pay practices, it's not that you're just getting someone that takes cash already. It's that you're getting a better delivery system attached to that, which always leads to a better result on the other end. And for a company of 100, that's huge. Like a company of 100 is never going to have an on-site physical therapist. As I see it, maybe I'm wrong, but like to go somewhere for a full day for like 100 people, it's hard to hire people for 1 day a week. Like to staff a clinician somewhere 1 day a week, you would really need like 6 or 7 of those in the same city so that one clinician could serve the whole group. This like more like the near site model.
Right.
And so you start getting into, especially like 50 plus, where we have to provide insurance now. But I mean, what's the bottom threshold? It's a question for you, because a lot's changed in the last probably 5 years. What's the bottom threshold for self-funded?
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked that. Our plan, so we're self-funded, Connor Insurance Plan, and we have 30 people on our plan.
Okay, yeah, so that's great.
But it's the same fundamental dilemma that you mentioned, is that if you're going to do something differently and have success, you can't deploy the same metrics.
Sure.
So for our health plan, people will be like, oh my gosh, it's too small to be self-funded with 30 on the plan. It's like, well, it is too small if you do it the same way as Anthem Fully Insured does it.
Yeah.
You have to have a different delivery system and a different business model to accomplish success and be able to manage a health plan that way. So similar deal. I was thinking as you were talking about we think we're narrowing in on physical therapy and pain, but you mentioned a lot of things that's in that immediate chain of events when it comes to medications. And, to say the quiet part out loud, that could be also pain medications, which is a whole different animal in and of itself, right?
Yep.
And then, you have ineffective potential physical therapy, injections, and you have this circle of, I'm doing all of these things, but nothing's changing, but we're going to continue to do all these things. So that's what's the table stakes for this, and employers rethinking how they're encouraging their employees to consider their pain element, right?
Mhm.
What else is missing? What are some of the unintended consequences in that we haven't talked about?
Of people just dealing with pain and doing the same
Yeah.
things over and over again, outside of spending a lot of money. I don't know, man. It's just it's a self-perpetuating cycle. You know what I mean? Like if you're doing that, you're never getting out of it. And as long as you're turning over employees and continuing to run a business, you might as well just say, hey, we're committed to losing a lot of money every year because of how we think about healthcare.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be that way. I think one of the big problems with like how care is delivered is care happens in a lot of ways, and people get value in a lot of ways that's not just at the point of contact. And like when I was at the on-site therapist for the distribution center, it was kind of this, hey, if we build it, they'll come mentality, where it's like, we're here. And so why aren't you coming? Because we're here. You got a captive audience of 2,000 people and we don't reach out to any of them. It's like, man, what a waste. You know what I mean? I think there's such a huge opportunity for information, education, content. You could literally solve an employee's problem with one good piece of content. You would just never know about it, and that's okay. If I had to choose between solving people's problem and never knowing about it, and only solving people's problems that I could objectively measure, I would choose the other, because you're going to affect a lot more people.
Yeah.
If you can provide high quality content that people will take action on, not only could you prevent something ahead of time, but let's just play it out by marketing metrics, where you've got your triangle. The tip of the triangle is your top 3%. These people will engage with whatever is available because that's just what they do. Then you have 17% below that are solution aware. They know they have a problem. They are looking for a solution. You're probably going to get these people in your clinic. And then you've got 20% below that who are problem aware, but they're not looking for anything. These are the people that need to be seeing your content over and over and over and over, because it takes somebody seeing 12 pieces of your content before they will make a decision to do anything with that. These are standard marketing metrics across all industries. Like, it's a low trust era. People just need to see a lot of stuff before they're going to choose to do anything. And then you've got the 60% below that don't have a problem, or at least they don't. They're not aware of the problem. These people need to see your content so that as soon as they become problem aware, they go look for your solution because they know it exists already. This is the environment that employers could create with their partners. Is like, hey, look, yeah, we got 1,000 people here. We don't know anything about what you're doing. Let's just create a content scheme that puts good information in front of people nonstop. Because in healthcare, we're not just fighting for patients with like other healthcare, right? You're fighting for the attention of people who need what you have, and you're fighting against Instagram and Snapchat and Netflix and YouTube and all the other distractions and all the other spam emails. I think daily is probably not enough to send content to people, because they're probably not going to see it. You know what I mean? Like, my inbox is so full of stuff. It'll take me a solid day to filter through stuff just to find the one email I actually need to look at. And you just have to assume that employees are the same, especially if they're not seeking a solution and you're sending them info once a week. They probably don't see it. They might get one a year. They might see one email that you sent per year. And so, I just think there's a huge play to be made for employers on education that can extend well beyond just care, that can be both helpful and hopeful for people to see it.
There's certainly a lot of noise, and it's hard to be top of mind, because usually when someone has a healthcare event, they're like, what do I do? And they don't know what the next step is. But
Yep.
With that, we have our listeners that, 200 employees to 300 employees that run manufacturing organizations or nonprofits or whatever the business is. They're like, hey, Dr. Chad, like, I agree. The model is broken. Our people are in this sick care system that is perpetual. What's your advice of, like, how do we get out of this? Like, what's the best way for us to get into a preventive PT, pain management, movement management, whatever it may be, circumstance? Like what's the pathway out? What does the perfect plan look like?
Yeah, I think it starts with just understanding the true nature of the problem you have. So just collect the data on it, And as employers, we like to make data-driven decisions. So let's just understand the scope of what's actually going on. The great way to do this, like an MSK audit, where we will actually pair up a little bit of subjective, like self-report information on what's going on, how long has it been going on, what have you been doing, and then actually do a physical movement screen. We can do about,
Is that for like all employees, or what does that look like?
I think the more the merrier for sure. But at the same time, I think you could do like your most high risk site or your most high risk individuals and then extrapolate the information out to the organization, right? Obviously, like let's say you've got a manufacturing company, they've got 500 employees, and maybe 80 of those are office staff. Now, we're not excluding office staff. They have pain just like anybody else. They just
Yeah.
have it for different
Sit
reasons.
down and they start curled over or
Yeah,
whatever it may be.
yeah. Same pain, same problems, just different reason why they have it. But in reality, they are a lower risk population than your labor force, right? So, hey, let's whittle down our screening event to your labor force. And even if we can get 150 of those, we can extrapolate the data out to the other 250. Or if you want to get all of them in there, that's always best because now we have accuracy. And when we do this, it allows us to understand a couple of things. One, who needs what? Now we have a risk profile per individual and we know exactly what their problems are. So when we build like a custom prevention based package, it is based on that individual, not based on, oh, the company has a problem. We install this for the company. Uh, and so you can easily pick up on who's really high risk. If we're going to prevent, what does that prevention program look like for these people? How do we direct them into that? Number two, if we're going to roll into some like annual plan for on-site care, who do we target early? Who are our highest risk individuals that are going to most likely be an exacerbation at work and could potentially become a work comp claim? Who is furthest along in their healthcare journey and not getting results is most likely to become a high cost claim? And how do we bring them into the fold quickly and early? So then we can get ROI early. Like, hey, look, these are high risk people. Let's get them in. Let's solve their problem, and let's start moving the needle back in the other direction. And then all the while, we still it's still open access to the company, but you need to promote and you need to engage and you need to be specific with what you communicate to your population. One of the most fascinating things I found over the last couple of years has been if you send out a message and let's just for simplicity say, if you have pain, you need to go over here and see this guy. And it's very low engagement. But if you say, if you have knee pain, go see this guy, immediate uptick. And it's simply because you called out the specific pain that somebody has. And you can do that for every pain point and get automatic uptick in people coming in. We see this with our current corporate clients. It's like we just send out a broad, general, hey, if your body hurts, you need to come over here, flat line. But if it's like, hey, you got neck pain, the following week that we go in there, there's a schedule full of neck pain. You know what I mean? And so it's just really interesting how speaking directly to a problem is so much more valuable than just speaking about a problem that we know people have. And so those are probably the biggest things. It's like just understand your population. How bad is the problem? How many people have pain? How and then how can we use that information to create legitimate prevention programs? And then instead of shooting for 100% engagement, which is never going to happen, how can we have targeted engagement that improves the financial metrics early versus waiting to see how things play out over 12, 18, 24 months when we can just know who should we be talking to and still not be exclusive, still not exclude anybody who needs medically necessary care. But I think that comes on the tails of better messaging, marketing, for lack of a better term, to the captive audience called your employees, helping them better understand what's going on, why is it like this, and here's how you can access the benefit we've created for you, whether that be virtual or on site, whatever the case may be.
I think this is a important conversation, and because if you're thinking about this, this is a topic that, and you mentioned, you alluded to this earlier. This is a topic that can really put someone on the sidelines. You mentioned, like, if someone's injured and we don't get to them, the thought goes into, maybe I can get paid and not work. And the worst thing for a human is to be put on the sidelines and remove activity. And, because what work is delivering to us, to all of us, because I believe that work is actually God ordained,
100%.
and it gives us dignity. And if we can help people provide for their families, if we can help people feel well in doing that, so when they go home, they're not hurting, but they're healthy to then contribute to their family, that's the highest human good that we can do, is to get someone out of that cycle or that pattern of pain, or the slippery slope to what an unnecessary surgery or even a negative surgical experience can provide.
Yeah.
And we mentioned, there's painkillers and all these other things that are just really big opportunities for big problems that can occur in this journey as you navigate. So I love it. I mean, this idea of more or less a concierge movement coach, if you will,
Yeah.
and someone that comes along to say, "Hey, are you okay? Like, is there anything that needs to be taken care of?" That's such a value I think employers can add, that um, really does well for their employees, but also does have return for the business for sure.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. And, maybe, I kind of like concierge movement coach. It's a little sexier than physical therapy, I think. But
Well,
whatever.
what you're doing is uh, it's proactive. It's ahead of, people pay for, you know, a a life coach, or whatever it is, a health coach or whatever. If we're starting, if our goal is for someone not to become injured and this backslide, then we are on the front end doing a coaching element and ensuring that there's longevity, and that people can be their best selves at work and
And
at home.
oh, for sure. And that's part of our, our bigger mission and values is how does someone's life change when their body doesn't hurt all the time? There's so many different ways that can go. And, over the years, I've gotten to have really unique conversations, um, just with people on, the faith component of what it means to wrestle with pain and move past that and do what you need to be doing, take care of your family. But, I think the thing you mentioned that stands out the most is when, like, we deliver the same thing, whether somebody has pain or they don't, because the solutions are the same. The same things that rehab you out of a problem are the same things that prevent the problem in the first place. It's just a matter of restoring the body back to whole, restoring it back to normal. And if you just restore it back to normal before you have pain, you're just one step ahead because you got to do the work and your body didn't hurt while you did it. But the secret is, and this is like with health coaches and life coaches and any other good coach, sports coaches, it doesn't matter. What they do for people is they make the unseen seen. They show somebody something they couldn't see in themselves, either because they didn't know or they were blind to it or whatever. And then they show them the pathway forwards to correct that. And that's all we do is we make the unseen seen. People's ankles don't hurt. So people don't think about them, but ankles are a big problem. People's shoulders might not hurt, but it's why their back hurts, because their work requires more out of their shoulder than they have. And the way that they go around that is with their back. And once you have a good understanding of how movement patterns are knit together with joint mobility and limitations, it's not rocket science anymore. Like, we don't need a diagnosis to create a treatment pathway, because our treatment pathway, our diagnosis is your body doesn't move right. That's your diagnosis. Our medical diagnosis is you move bad. And so what do we need to do to make you move good? And just create clear pathways for, here's how you do that in 15 minutes a day or less.
Well, in your example, does it circle back to the beginning conversation? If someone has shoulder pain or they have back pain because of their shoulder issue and their back is compensating for whatever's going on with their shoulder. If they have a diagnosis code of back pain, and you work on their shoulder, in a traditional model, is the physical therapist isn't getting paid.
Yeah,
Right?
I don't know how they're going to justify it. Maybe
So
they
then,
can do, yeah.
so then you're really not working on the thing that actually is causing the back pain.
Sure.
Or
And
you're
this
not getting, or if you do, you're not getting paid for it.
yeah. Yeah. And it can be kind of convoluted, because notes can be very vague, and then you're just sending off billing codes. But if somebody ever comes back and audits that, and it's like, yeah, well, what exactly did you do here?
Yeah, I
Why did
remember
you
you saying a couple of years ago, in talking about dealing with pain, is the model. It's like a engine in your car.
Hmm.
The light comes on your dash to say you have an engine problem, and the question is are you actually going to go and fix the engine problem, or is the approach that you want to turn the light off?
Yeah, that's it.
In the traditional model, it's, well, let's clip the wire so that the light turns off,
Yep.
because the that's the problem.
Yep.
And
Those
really,
are non-solution solutions.
that's right.
And it kind of wraps us back to the Keystone, which we didn't talk about, but the pelvis has become such an interesting component of the engine, where it spins off so many problems into the rest of the body that you have to start there. I'm fixed on that. You will not convince me otherwise. If somebody has pain in their shoulder and you find a pelvis asymmetry, you have to correct that, or you will not have a good result in the shoulder. You just won't, because I've seen it a million times at this point, where somebody's missing shoulder motion and they have pain in the shoulder. We correct the pelvis and they have better motion and less pain in their shoulder. We didn't even touch their shoulder. And so this goes back to, like, okay, well, how can we justify that in the traditional model? That's hard. And but it also created the foundation for, hey, look, we can solve a lot of problems real quick just starting here. This is the foundation of prevention programs. So let's test this and correct it, and then branch out from there. But that's the unseen. You know what I mean? You got to uncover things that nobody else is uncovering. Those are all the stones. Even taking pain relief into nutrition, hormone balance, there are several other plays to make that can be very orthopedic, very musculoskeletal, and have nothing to do with your mechanical system. But 98% of the time, the mechanical system is the easiest place to start. There's a lot of things going wrong with it that are easy to address, but then it gives us a series of, like, green lights. Like, okay, we sorted out the mechanical pieces. We sorted out your movement patterns. They look ideal. Your mobility is ideal. And we still have pain. So what other rocks can we turn over? Okay, well, let's talk about your diet. Well, I eat only things out of a wrapper. Okay, well, let's not do that and see how your body feels. Let's have some whole foods. Okay, I drink 0 ounces of water a day. Let's just take that to like 30 and see how you feel. You know what I mean? I've worked with a lot of men and women who they get 99% there, but they're still just, man, they can't get right over the hump. They go get tested. Their hormones are way off. They roll on to a supplement, feel 100%. So there are a lot of things that really extends outside of, I think, the employer spectrum. I think that's gonna take 3 or 4 decades to integrate that stuff into employer groups, probably, if ever. But
Right. A lot of personal choice in that.
yeah,
A
yeah,
lot
it
of
really
it is
is.
in the best interest of the employee. It's personal choice. But
Yep.
anyway, Chad, thanks for the conversation today and your insight into really how that concierge movement coach is the redefinition of the status quo of physical therapy and your mission to solve for that. So we ask our guests 2 questions at the end of every show that we want to ask you. The first one is, what is a risk that you have taken that has changed your life?
Starting the business, for sure. That was a big one. Very risky at the time. Also, my decision to do that was against lots of other people's decisions. You got a good job, you got the stable money. We just don't understand why you would do it. And so it not only came with the inherent risks of starting a business, but a lot of relational turmoil from a couple of different angles until it kind of proved itself out. So I don't know that there's been anything more life changing, both financially, spiritually, just the wisdom you gain, the personal development from running a business. You know the drill. So many net positives, even when it seems like you're getting kicked in the face over and over again. There's probably nothing better than business.
And Chad, the second and final question is, what is left yet unfinished that you have the resolve to complete?
Ooh, that's a big one. My biggest mission, summed up very quickly, is changing the way that employees interface with musculoskeletal healthcare. And there's a lot packed into that. And really, I think if I get to see my mission all the way through, it will be the legitimate creation of an A to Z musculoskeletal health service, which helps employers navigate prevention, medically necessary care, pre-surgical intervention, post-surgical intervention, and return to work. This is the musculoskeletal health journey. Right now, it's just physical therapy. There's so much we can do to help people. Like we talk about employers and we talk about employees. These are people, and people are getting underserved because the systems aren't built for them to have success. And so my goal is in my little neck of the woods to build that system that makes sure people have the best success in their musculoskeletal health journey. We're just leveraging the opportunity that employers provide for us to do that because it's beneficial to their employees, it's beneficial to me, and it is beneficial back to the employer. It's a pretty sweet spot to be in.
Well, it sounds like you're looking to build a end-to-end practice, but along the way, you might accidentally build a whole industry.
Well, wouldn't that be something?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be something? Well, Chad, thanks again for joining us today. And thanks to our listeners for joining us on another episode of Risk and Resolve. We'll catch you next time.